Okay. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming. This is for autism. April is Autism Awareness Month, so I'm just doing this because I would just like for people to have a better understanding of autism and kind of what it is. A lot of people don't understand like what it is, or there's a lot around it. It's a very complex brain disorder, disconnection. So just to kind of increase awareness about like how those disconnections actually are affecting these kids. I have a disclaimer. So the slides are, I'm not going to read directly off of them, so you guys just read them. I'm just going to go over some details of the actual bullet points. And this is my first go at this. Come talk to me after the presentation if you recognize like any discrepancies, if any of you guys have done any reading up about any of the certain areas that I'm going to be talking about, and you just want to talk to me about it or see if there's anything that you've learned. I'm definitely open to that because I need to know, I want to know more about it. I have 3 boys, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because my middle kid, my 5-year-old Dylan, he has autism. So it's very close to me. I was just wondering if I can get a show of hands of people who know somebody directly outside of work who has autism. Okay. My first like 3 or 4 slides are going to illustrate like there's a lot of people affected, like, you know, that they know or they know somebody directly. So these first 4 slides just kind of explain pretty much how it's been rising, the rise of this of autism. Okay. So this is Dylan. He was diagnosed in January 2014. He's my 5-year-old. I have 3 boys, Louis, Dylan, and Max, LDM. So going into this, I only knew about autism from the movie Rain Man. It's not a good reference because Dustin Hoffman portrays a autistic savant, and a lot of savants are not a majority, like extremely smart in certain areas. The struggles are more real than what kind of Hollywood conveys. Another movie, which is really good, is The Accountant. Anybody ever see that? No? Yeah. It's a really cool action movie that kind of makes a person who's autistic out to be kind of like a superhero or whatever. It's pretty cool, but it's not all that glitz and glamour. And in that movie, one thing I like about that movie is how they use a lot of the terminology around autism and kids. They use it a lot. They use a lot of correct terminology. So that's a good thing. It increases awareness for autism. Some of the real struggles are that parents and that autisms have are, just to kind of give you an idea, these kids, they eat drywall, Dylan eats dirt every now and then, so my wife and I joke around, you know, he's got his minerals for the day, but they don't have like the ability to kind of see, you know, what's right and wrong a lot of the time, so they hit themselves. Sometimes they're a threat to others because of their uncontrollable tantrums. Okay, some stats on autism. 1 in 68 are diagnosed with autism. The CDC, that's based on CDC stats from 2010. It takes 6 to 8 years to come to these numbers, so these numbers are even higher right now. So those numbers are behind. That's how much it takes them to crunch the numbers, collect the data, all that stuff. This is a worldwide study. The numbers are higher in the US alone. And so every 20 minutes, another child is diagnosed with autism. More people are diagnosed with autism than AIDS, diabetes, and cancer combined. And it's costing our nation billions of dollars. So this is Denzel Washington in the movie Training Day. And just pretend like he's autism. He's representing autism, and he's saying this with the same passion that he did in the movie. Does anybody see that movie, Training Day? Yeah, okay. Global warming experts have been known to predict global extinction in about 20 years. By then, if you're going to look, I'm going to show you in my next slide another chart. By then, pretty much 1 in 2 children, or if not all children, based on these numbers, will be diagnosed with autism. Some people have been known to predict by 2025, 1 in 2 children will be diagnosed with autism. This is based on the current number of diagnoses that the CDC releases. It's a bit extreme, but I'm going to illustrate this in the next slide. So you can see in 1975, 1 in 5,000 children were diagnosed with autism. And then if you jump ahead to the end of the slide, there's a 40-person diagnosis difference within a period of 2 years. And that number is rising exponentially. It's officially an epidemic. A lot of people don't realize this, that how prominent it is that we kind of get to the bottom of this, or we find a solution, or find the cause. And I'm going to be talking about the cause and the solutions in a couple of other slides here. The president of Autism Speaks, I'm sure you guys have heard of that. They do a lot of marketing for autism awareness, is basically pleading for a national plan. He states that it's a national emergency and that we need to get on top of it. Based on these numbers, I already gave that stat, never mind. So, when I say less prevalent in this slide here, I don't mean less important. These less prevalent diseases are not rising at a rate, they're not rising at a rate as alarming as autism is. Check out these numbers here. For the first column is the number of children affected out of 100,000, and the second column is how much funding it's receiving. Just to kind of illustrate my point, if it's an epidemic, we need to get more funding. So this is why I'm trying to create, talking about this and create more awareness, because it just needs a lot more attention, considering the urgency of the issue. So at the top of the list, 1,135 kids affected out of 100,000, and then the numbers just kind of go down for these other conditions. What is autism? This is the Google definition. Most definitions do not really reveal what autism is. It's just hard because it's hard to understand, because it's based on the brain, a dysfunction or a disconnection in the brain, that all kids have different symptoms. It's not a single condition. That's why they use the abbreviation autism spectrum disorder. It's a spectrum of symptoms and conditions. If a person is on the spectrum, it just means that they have some form of autism. ASD is a name for a group of developmental disorders. It is a wide range of spectrum or a spectrum of symptoms, skills, and levels of diabetes, or I'm sorry, disabilities. Conditions on the spectrum, just an example, a couple examples, are PDD, which is pervasive developmental disorders, PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, SDD, which is specific developmental disorders, Asperger's, and then there's more. People with ASD often have the following characteristics: ongoing social problems, and that include difficulty communicating and interacting with others. There isn't one type of autism. There's pretty much a saying in the autism community that if you've met one autistic child or one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, because the range is just, they all have different symptoms. So, it's a functional disconnection between the left and the right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is the logic, analysis, math, facts, memorization. The right side of the brain is your creativity, imagination, holistic thinking, nonverbal communication, and feelings. They have trouble with this. The right side of the brain is lower, it's less developed. This is where the main hardship is with kids with autism. They can't, the creativity stuff, the stuff that's abstract, that level of the brain is a lot lower. So it's underdeveloped. This explains the ongoing social problems and difficulty communicating and interacting with others, nonverbal communication. A way I remember it is, there's an acronym that my son's therapist taught me. It's B.E.C.S, B.E.C.S. So if, just remembering that, like, just so you could know what part they're having trouble with, is B.E.C.S stands for behavioral, emotional, cognitive, and social. That's the area that they have trouble in. That's the area of the brain that's underdeveloped. This is just kind of cool, I thought, because it kind of shows the left and right side in relation to our industry. Okay. The neurons are not making the right connections. This is the brain functionality. This part, on top of being underdeveloped, these neurons are kind of misfiring. It goes from your left side to your right side of the brain. The neurons in the brain are misfiring. They're not getting that feedback that they should be from the right side of the brain. So I have a couple analogies here. I hope they help kind of people understand, like, what that looks like in a kid with autism. So what would you do if you were riding a train and it missed your stop and your cell phone was out of battery? You'd worry, things are unorganized and thrown off. You don't know what to do because there's nothing you can do, and you have no control over the situation. Your thoughts constantly repeat in your head, and you try to figure out how things will play out. Will the person picking me up be worried? How will I get a hold of them? How far is the next stop? Do the conductors think that no one's left on the train? The difference between you and a person with autism in this situation is that you have control over these thoughts. You can handle the situation through rationality. Autistic brains are missing that rationality, since the neurons aren't making the right connections to the calming emotions needed. It's a very close mindset to OCD in a way. Actually, the therapy that I'm taking my son, they treat OCD as well, because it's a disconnect. It's also a disconnection in the brain. Your executive functions are a simultaneous coordination between specific parts of the brain to get you to perform tasks that, to the best of your ability. Your brain conducts these operations within fractions of a second. The specific parts involved in execution or I'm sorry, executive functions are this. The executive functions are controlled by your frontal lobe. There's an interaction between your frontal lobe, your basal ganglia, and your cerebellum. Your frontal lobe is responsible for movements, thoughts, and behaviors. Your basal ganglia is a mediator between the frontal lobe and the cerebellum. Your cerebellum is responsible for handling visual spatial. It times the coordination of your body in space, and it tells you where your body is in space and is there for balance. It also works with your vestibular, your inner ear mechanism for balance and coordination. So an example of your frontal lobe, basal ganglia, and cerebellum, how they're working together is, here's another analogy. Your dog is letting you know that you need to go, that they need to go to the bathroom. The frontal lobe, when you see your dog letting you know this, your frontal lobe says, I have to get up now and put my shoes on and get the leash. The basal ganglia, you are about to get up, so see if the cerebellum has any suggestions before you do this. Your cerebellum, you've been sitting on the couch for 2 hours, binge watching Stranger Things. You've been sitting on your left calf, and it's asleep now. Your frontal lobe says you're going to need to move slowly because I should drink some, or perhaps I should drink some water before I go for a walk, since I'm a little hungover from the wedding last night. So the brain is the control center. These are the effects of a dysfunctioning brain. Your brain is a control center. When your brain is off, your whole system gets thrown off. And these are some common problems that you see. I have in the list in the slide. Not only do you have to deal with autistic tendencies, you're also stuck dealing with sort of a byproduct of autism: anxiety, depression, and obsessive compulsions. Trouble sleeping. Some have seizures. Again, when your brain is off, your gut is off, and your gut is your entire digestive system. So that's why you see a lot of autistic kids. That's why you keep them away from gluten, certain other dietary things, because your gut is almost like your second brain. It has as many neurons as a dog's brain, and there's constant communication between your gut and your brain. So the brain's thrown off in a kid with autism or dysfunction or disconnection, then your digestive system is thrown off. So that's why you see a lot of sensitivities and dietary problems and other things. Sensory integration disorder. Sensory signals are distorted. They're not clean. They're not crisp. There is no diagnosis and symptoms. There is no medical detection or cure for autism. It is diagnosed by symptoms, just seeing and recognizing symptoms. Parents may begin to question the health of their children when developmental milestones are not met, including age-appropriate motor movement and speech production. Some symptoms: difficulty using and understanding language, difficulty relating to people, objects, and events. For example, lack of eye contact, pointing behavior, and lack of facial expressions. Unusual play with toys and other objects, difficulty with changes in routine or familiar surroundings, repetitive body movements and behavior patterns, such as hand flapping, hair twirling, foot tapping, and more complex movements. Inability to cuddle or be comforted, treat people like objects, difficulty regulating behavior and emotions, which may result in temper tantrums, anxiety, and aggression, emotional breakdowns. An example of a child treating people like objects. When we first found out about Dylan having autism, my wife, she would have some breakdowns sometimes, and she would cry, would get emotional. So Dylan would he would see that early on in in his, you know, right after that, and he wouldn't. They don't react. They don't. They'll look at her like an object. He looked at her, and then he would just kind of continue what he was doing, which is usually they're called perseverations, like when they do the hand flapping and the running back and forth or running around in circles. So that he would just continue doing that kind of stuff. The difference is, like my 1-year-old, he'll see that, like he's like, you have a kid that's not disconnected. They can read you like very early in life. They can see that you're hurt or you're emotional, or they can, you know, anger or whatever. They're really good at determining that stuff. I didn't realize this until, you know, dealing with Dylan. Examples of, let's see. So it was hard to tell with Dylan because different autistic kids have different levels of anxiety. Different levels of their autism. Although they don't diagnose that anymore, where they say like they're high functioning autism, low functioning autism. They don't diagnose that. They just say that you're on the spectrum right now. But it's hard if you have somebody that's maybe in the middle somewhere. It's hard to tell. You know, it's like these symptoms that I described to you. These are also behaviors that occur in regular kids, just kids that, you know, where their brain is functioning normally. But the trick is to kind of look for these things in context. It's hard, and it was hard to tell with Dylan. I partially was in denial, I guess, about it when we were first going. But when he turned 2, it was kind of obvious, but I was still in denial. But anyways, so Dylan is 5, and he does not talk. He can say words, but he does not say them at the appropriate times. When he was young, we just thought he was a late bloomer. It may sound obvious and easy to catch, but when it's your own kid, denial sets in hard. It's hard to tell because a lot of these behaviors are considered normal to some degree in certain stages, and sometimes the stages are longer than others. Like walking, you have late walkers and you have late talkers. Look for, like I just mentioned, look for the appropriate time and the appropriate degree. This is also hard to determine early in the early stages while they're developing. What causes autism? The cause is unknown. Scientists are looking into a gene or genes. On the CDC website, it states, many scientists agree that autism is caused by genes. I don't like that statement because it's not really a fact. They put it on there for some reason. Diagnosis is climbing at a staggering rate that can't be explained by genetics alone. Genes take many generations in order for traits to become a part of them. Just think about the theory of evolution. How long would it take for the tadpole to get arms or whatever? You know what I'm saying? That's a genetic thing that happens over a lot of large amount of time. The one thing, epigenetics. Has anybody ever heard or done any reading on epigenetics here? No? Okay. Epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. So basically, what that means is that your genes can be influenced, the behavior of your genes can be influenced by environmental things right away, and it's not changing the way that your gene is behaving, if that makes any sense. Does that make, like the makeup of that gene? There's something that's put on top of it that of your genes that influences the behavior. Epigenetics can be a key player in how environmental influences can be rapidly attaching themselves to our genes, which our kids can inherit from us right away. The good thing is that these things can be changed right away in a positive way. A combination of environmental influences may be making a person more likely to develop autism when they are genetically predisposed to autism. The environmental influences further increase the risk factor of autism rather than cause it. What happened here? Sorry. The critical period may have been shut down. Another cause, what they're looking into, this has to do with neuroplasticity and just child development early on. Their critical period may have been shut down too early or was overstimulated for some reason, most likely an environmental influence. If you want a great representation of how technology can be an environmental influence through epigenetics, there's a documentary that I watched called Disconnected, D-S-K-N-E-C-T-D. I'll send out this presentation too if you guys want to refer to it. Get Disconnected. It's on Amazon Prime. It's free. You can watch it. It's really good. It talks about distraction and how we need downtime for reflection, among many other things, and how that affects our behavior socially. And there's a lot of studies out there that kind of show that it's not having a good effect on us. Is there a cure? There is not a cure yet, but there are treatments, there are therapies. There's tons of therapies and treatments out there. There's homeopathic therapies. There's the ones that doctors recommend are ABA, speech, occupational, behavioral, physical, and a lot of other those. There's medication, there's diet in combination with medication, diet, homeopathic remedies, detoxification, and many more. Although people on the spectrum have been able to lose their diagnosis to just ADD or OCD, they're never really considered cured, but there are cases that they do lose their diagnosis. Jenny McCarthy's kid lost his diagnosis. He's not on the spectrum technically. I think he just has OCD now. Or ADD, sorry. So neuroplasticity is what the therapy and a lot of therapies are based on now for a lot of things. Before, scientists believed in localization, and then there's neuroplasticity. Localizationists believed that a particular area of the brain, if a particular area of the brain was damaged, it was lost forever, since that particular area was the only part of the brain that could perform a specific task. This is no longer the belief. Neuroplasticity has taken that over, and there's a book called The Brain That Changes Itself, really good. It's just about neuroplasticity and how the brain is plastic. What they mean by the brain is plastic, it means that the brain can change itself. The brain can remap lost functionality to a different area if you train it to do so. An example of that would be a stroke victim has brain trauma, was thought to be incurable due to beliefs in localizationism. If somebody had a stroke maybe 20 or 30 years ago, they would say, you're incurable, we can't do anything for you. 20 or 30 years later, they're applying neuroplastic therapies to stroke victims that had that happen to them a while ago, and the brain is able to remap itself amazingly to different areas. Those lost functionalities or whatever, it's curing itself. Like it's 20 or 30 years after, which is amazing. So yeah, I was just reading the rest of my sentence. Most medical treatments are now neuroplasticity based. An example, my older son, Louis, he has a lazy eye. His eye doctor has him wearing a patch that covers his good eye for about 8 hours a day. so that it forces the use of his bad eye. That's a perfect example of the brain remapping itself and healing itself. You're forcing that use. This only works because he is still in his critical period. The critical period in kids for this particular, for his eye, I guess, is till about 7 or 8. So he's still wearing it. He's been wearing it for over a year, or about 2 years actually. But it's working. He went from 2030 to 2070. So we're trying to get him to 2020 in that eye. So dealing with autism, it's hard to take them anywhere because the little things set them off. There are little things that set them off. Keeping away from gluten. If you're in a store, if you're going grocery shopping, and there's bread everywhere and gluten stuff, they have emotional breakdowns. Dylan's most difficult symptom that we had to deal with a lot was emotional breakdowns when he went places. If he saw food he couldn't have, or just had a hard time transitioning or being in different surroundings. One of the things is it's hard, and I know like it's just us being weird. People stare at you when this happens. It's a hard thing to deal with, and they're not, sometimes they're judging, sometimes they're not. They give us dirty looks or whatever. What helps is some people come up and they talk to him, or us, when he's having a public breakdown, which eases the level of anxiety and is way better than staring at you. We have to take him out. We have to take him out whether he has fits or not. Life goes on, and we just need to power through that judgment of people not knowing what we're actually dealing with. Please don't be quick to judge the next time you see a parent struggling with their kid's behavior. Kids with Down syndrome, you could physically tell that they have Down syndrome. Parents of kids with autism, they don't have that. You can't tell. So a lot of, we get dirty looks. I even had some lady yell at me for not disciplining my kid, and it's just, I got into an argument. It wasn't worth it with her, but that sort of stuff happens. And just with the increase of diagnosis and kids that are out there with this dysfunction, you just never know. You'll see more than you know, I guess. There are more things being catered to kids with autism, but parents are trying to include their disconnected kids in everyday life, and it's difficult. It's good for them to be involved in going out and doing things normally instead of avoiding these things because it's easier. But we need to increase awareness so that people aren't so quick to judge. So Dylan's treatment, I have one more slide, just so you know. I'm taking him to this place called Brain Balance. What I like about them is they have a structured approach in diagnosing developmental status and brain functionality. The therapy starts from the ground up in terms of infant and or child development. Getting rid of primitive reflexes is one of the things that you start with in this therapy. Common primitive reflexes, Moreau, which is the startle reflex, the palmar grasp and palmar reflex, moves the toes away from the shins and curls the toes down. Executive functions, which is your cognitive control, are built on top of the primitive reflexes as part of normal frontal lobe development. As the executive functions develop, the child will appear to have lost the primitive reflexes, but they're just masked in a sense, and they will remain this way forever unless some sort of brain trauma interrupts it like a stroke. So Dylan's still showing primitive reflexes, which he's not supposed to. So we're building on top of those primitive reflexes. And that's something that should have been done when he was 1 in a normal development and normal development for a child. We're working on eye contact and spatial awareness, neuroplasticity-based exercises, channeling the input through the left brain in order to trigger right brain activity. So we're trying to bring that right brain up. This gets the brain to remap itself on developing the right brain functions so that the brain can start making more of the right neurological connections between the left and the right brain. Conclusion, many of you are already doing this, but diet, just be more aware, because this is kind of where epigenetics come in. Whatever you put in your body, the brain becomes as well. You are what you eat. Eat healthy, stay away from GMO, processed pesticides, antibiotics. Eat good fats like fish oil. An example of that, like, you know, your diet, you are what you eat. Like the axon, which is the long part of a neuron in your brain, is made up of mostly fat. So if you're eating good fat, that just promotes better functionality in your brain, because that stuff's going to your brain and that's becoming you. You are what you eat. So regulate screen time, avoid distractions in order to give yourself downtime for reflection, daydreaming, and processing of your recent past experiences. Remember how epigenetics plays a role in being a part of the possible cause. Talk to the kid that the mom in the store is struggling with. Make them feel better. This is up to you. It's, you know, some parents may not like that. I don't know. We appreciate that when people try to comfort, or just, you know, sometimes just, you know, even with normal kids, just somebody comes up to them and talks to them and they just calm down right away because they react better to their parents or to people that aren't their parents. Comfort them and don't stare. Just be aware that you know, if you see somebody in the store, and don't judge that parent because they might be dealing with autism. Donate to charities and give money directly to families that need it. I will send out a link to a charity that I would promote that gives money directly to the families. But like at this point, you know, research donations and you know, all that stuff. It's needed because of how it's an epidemic. See if your church has a need for this kind of help. I know in our church, you know, they don't have a special needs, but they have some people that are willing to help watch them, because they're just different things that they have to deal with, like I went over. So they're willing to listen to us and take, you know, like we tell them what to watch out for, and you know, just kind of whatever their bad habits are, and spread the word. It is an official epidemic, so that's why I'm doing this. I wish, like, you know, when you get like that little ribbon for autism awareness, I wish like this information would just kind of just get put into your brain somehow, like the Matrix or something. But that's it. Thank you. It was 45 minutes less than my tester. Yeah. Yeah, I'll send it out.